Hey everyone, and welcome to Business Boutique. I'm Christy Wright, and today we are continuing the conversation with my friend Natalie Franke. If you remember from part one, Natalie is the co-founder of the Rising Tide Society, and she's the head of community at Honeybook. And she has such a cool story, and we're gonna keep hearing it. Check this out. I love the name Rising Tide Society. Can we just talk about this? Because This is something where I feel like, especially in business, and I know you work with a lot of creatives, but in business in general, it can be so cutthroat, and you could feel the pressure that that's the right way to do business, that the right way to do business is compete. If you're gonna get a spot at the top, especially for women, and I won't go on my tangent here about women, but you've got to elbow other women out of the way to get to the top because, oh my gosh, it's a scarcity mindset. There's only so many spots at the top, so you better just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, elbow some people out of the way, and work really hard. And I'm constantly beating this drum of it doesn't have to be that way. There is enough room for us in the marketplace, and I believe we serve an abundant God where we don't have any limits. There's not a finite amount of spots in the marketplace. So let's just talk about this name and your heart behind it, and I just can't wait to dig into this with you because I know that you and I are just so, have the same passion for this.
Absolutely. Well, I think, you really hit the nail on the head for me when you said, when you start in business, you're introduced to the concept of a cutthroat industry where, it's dog eat dog, it's push others down to get higher, it's, literally elbow other women out of the way because there's only so many spots for us, right? That is very much as well what I was introduced to when I started. And, I kept going back to just those values of, if I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, I don't want to live that way. That's just me. I don't want to push other women down to succeed. Right. And I was really fortunate that I developed sort of this, I don't know what to call it, whether it's support network or an empowerment system of women that had already gone before me. Women that had done it, women that were doing it, women that were building businesses or were, creating a life for themselves that didn't resemble a traditional 9-to-5 job. They were doing something unique. They were creating something on the side. And I immediately felt this desire, even before Rising Tide, to reshape our perspective. I think all of our actions, they come from our viewpoint. They come from our perspective. I literally studied how the brain and how vision works. We don't see with our eyes. We literally see with our mind. And if our mind is shaped by that perspective, the cutthroat, we have to elbow each other to get to the top perspective, then that is exactly what's going to happen. Our actions will follow. Our intent and our actions are in alignment. But if we embrace what I call community over competition, and this is the mindset that I have championed for the last 3 years through Rising Tide, and the name, a rising tide lifts all boats, from that famous JFK quote. It stems from that abundance mindset, that thought process that says to us, no, there isn't only one spot at the top, but rather there is an abundance of opportunities for all of us, that we're uniquely shaped and crafted to do something with our lives that is important and of value and that can help and impact others. And my success is not going to be the same as your success. The minute we understand that, we can actually compete in a healthy way. I love competition. I think it is fantastic for innovation. It spurs us forward. It gets us moving. But where I have a problem with it is when competition stifles us from stepping forward into becoming the person we are meant to be because we feel somehow that we aren't enough, we don't measure up, we're never going to be good enough, and that others view sort of their own success by the lens not of how can they contribute, how can they innovate, how can they improve, but rather how can they beat someone else, how can they stop someone else, how can they stifle the success of another. And the name, a Rising Tide Society, and the quote, a rising tide lifts all boats, gets to the heart of this mindset of community over competition and this mindset of abundance by essentially saying that when one of us succeeds, it gives an opportunity for all of us to rise up as well. And I believe this, I really do. I even believe in the visual, the shattering of a glass ceiling, that thought process. Well, there's one woman, there's going to be thousands of women or thousands of people that are pushing through an obstacle, that are pushing through a glass ceiling, and they're going to be punching it, and they're going to be kicking it, and they're going to be creating those little tiny chips and cracks along that ceiling. But there might be one person, that first person, that actually gets through it. And once that person has gotten through that barrier, has broken through that glass ceiling, it gives permission to the rest to now rise up and do the same. And I believe that happens in economies. I believe that happens in entrepreneurship. I believe that happens in business. And so the name of Rising Tide Society, what it means at its heart is that when one of us rises, we all have permission to rise as well. And that it's an ecosystem, that we're in this together, that when one of us creates high standards for our business, when one of us teaches, business ethics and how to operate properly, how to look out for others, we all thrive in the process. And I've seen that. I've seen that happen in the creative space. And I believe that can transcend just from my little bubble to be something that we look at, as small business owners in a larger way.
I love this because I love how you hit on it from the practical level of, from the economic level, from also just the relational level, but even the psychological level, because this is something I've always been fascinated by psychology, but let's just talk about like the words we use, Natalie. Like if I was to say something negative about another woman or another business owner, that actually doesn't make her look bad, it makes me look bad. But Absolutely. We miss that in business. We think, oh my gosh, I've got to, compete and I've got to elbow people out of the way. It doesn't actually make the people you're trying to step on look bad, it makes you look bad from that posture. But the opposite is also true. If I speak really highly of another woman in business, it not only makes her look good, it makes me look good. It is the rising tide of, oh, that person is so complimentary, or that person is so generous, that person is so giving and loving, and you attribute all these qualities to that person. And I think this is so countercultural. It's almost counterintuitive because you feel like, oh my gosh, I've got to get ahead. But I love this idea of community over competition. The way I've said it, which I like your way better, is collaboration over competition. Look at how can you work together? How can you lock arms? And there's just such power in women championing other women. And one of the things that I've heard is kind of a myth circulating in the business world is if you can't be the best at something, you shouldn't even do it. Like if you can't be the best, then don't even try. And I think that's so ludicrous because then no one will ever be good because they'll never be beginners because they'll never try. But also we need a lot of different people with different skill sets, even at different levels, just because you may not be the best in an industry and you don't have the monopoly on that entire thing doesn't mean you don't add value. And there's a group of people that you help. I had a situation in spring of 2017, where I was on book tour launching the Business Boutique book. And we would do book signings in different bookstores. So like Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, that type of thing. And we'd have women come and they'd line up, I'd sign their books, and then they'd all sit in some chairs. And I would do like an informal coaching session, just answer Q&A, that kind of stuff. And every single city, I got asked the same question. What do I do if someone's already doing the thing I want to do? Like there's no point, right? Someone's already doing it. There's already a photographer in my town. There's already a hair bow maker in my town. There's already a personal organizer or a bag maker or whatever. And I would say, look around you. How many books are in this bookstore? Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. I don't know how big their back stock is. But you're standing here holding mine. Why is that? My book is not the best book in the world. But I believe there's a group of people that only I can help in the way that I can help them. I think the same is true for you. There's a group of people that only you can help in only the way that you can help them. And so even if there are other people in the market, it doesn't take away from what God wants to do through you. And so I'm really kind of stinking tired of this saturated market myth of, oh, there's no space for me. My talent, my style, my experience, my perspective that I bring to the market, or you bring to the market, or another person brings to the market, because it all stems from the same scarcity mindset. It all stems from the same fear-based mindset that there's not enough room. And I just love how you bring these people together. You don't just say, oh, there's room for you. You bring them together, and then they get to experience it firsthand of what community feels like. So it gives them permission to rise, as you describe it, but it also relieves the fears and isolation that entrepreneurship really a lot of times carries with it, where you are collaborating, you're hanging out, you don't feel so alone. So I just love your heartbeat in this. And it shows that it's meeting such a felt need at how much it's taken off, right? Like how this is so huge. I want to talk really quickly about this aspect of community, because you know it way better than I do. And you even know the psychological effects, the scientific side. Like, why is community so important for all of us? And kind of why are we wired for community? Why does this matter so much?
I mean, we are wired to be social, period, the end. We're not created to live in isolation. As human beings, We are designed all the way down to our neural networks and how we communicate and how the brain prioritizes, things even like cognition of language, the ability to communicate, where that's located in the brain. All of that kind of indicates to us that human beings, as a creature, as an existing being, are designed to live with others. We're designed to be social creatures. And what I have found, and what I believe to be really important, is that, if you look way back in the history of humankind, we lived in tribes and we lived in communities. We lived with others. Even, today, a lot of families live in dynamic environments where, you have grandparents in the home, you have aunts and uncles in the home. I'm literally at my in-laws right now doing this interview. And these micro communities and these communities have shaped us from the very, very early beginnings of human existence. And so what's interesting about this is that the human brain has not changed a lot since those early days of, being in a community that's small, like a tribe or a small town, or, even like a manor, and having people all working and living together. The brain hasn't evolved or changed since that period of time. However, technology has changed our society in ways that are hard to even fathom. We are now so isolated as human beings from the original intention and creation of how we were wired to work together in community. Think about the fact that for many of us, especially those who work from home, from those who work behind a computer, our only other interaction with human beings is through passive listening, like to a podcast or an interview, or watching the television in the morning, and maybe having a couple conversations with our significant others or our friends if we get the chance to see them throughout the day. And our community, our actual network, has been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking with the changes in technology and the changes in society. And so if you were to look at what really fulfills sort of a wide and very healthy lifestyle, it's relationships. Relationships are at the core, I really believe this with everything in my heart, are at the core of what makes someone fulfilled and grounded and ultimately, I believe, successful, because relationships are what we are designed and created to interact with and be a part of every single day of our lives. And so when you look at business, it's no different. In business, yes, you can go and you can create something completely on your own, but even entrepreneurship is a team sport. I believe that. Even solopreneurship is a team sport. You need a community. You need people that can teach you and support you and, open doors for you you could never even see, or point out areas of weakness perhaps you weren't able to perceive. And that's ultimately because we're created for that. We are wired down to our very DNA to be social and to live in communities. And just because society has changed and just because technology has, shifted how we actually interact, I don't believe that it changes our fundamental desire and need to be with others. And I believe that's in person. I think there's a lot of benefits to online communication and communities. Both of us have seen that through leading our own online communities. But at the end of the day, I think where the magic happens is when you can take those online connections and transform them into offline relationships, where you can go out to a book signing and actually get to listen to Christy and then have that opportunity to connect with others in the audience and hear that, wow, that other woman, she's going through something similar to what I'm going through. Or, to get together at a coffee shop with other entrepreneurs in your town and to talk about what's going on, to talk about how you're innovating or what lessons you're learning or how the market's changing. Because you're going to get these leaps and jumps ahead in your business, but you're also going to gain those foundational relationships that we need, that we are designed and created to have in our lives and to foster in the lives of others.
I love how you focus on relationships, because it really is so true. Whether you have a business or not, the quality of your life is a direct reflection of the quality of your relationships. If your relationships are bad, it doesn't matter how booming your business is, because your quality of life is not going to be as good. But the opposite is also true. When you have quality relationships in your life, you can endure so many challenges and setbacks and hurdles and frustrations day to day in different aspects of your life. And it's funny how you describe this, Natalie, because when we set out to create Business Boutique, we were very focused on the primary of teaching women the tools and steps they needed to start a business. And for us, I think when we started, for us, the community was secondary. We didn't realize the power that was going to have until it happened. And it really has taken on a life of its own. And I love how you emphasize in person, because when we have our online community, like you said, and I work with women and so on, they connect online. But when you get 3,000 women in the room, and they're laughing together and they're crying together and they are experiencing things together, the power is in that. The power is actually not what happens on stage. The power is in the connection between those women sitting next to people on each side of them, that they walked in that room, and Natalie, they all believed, I'm the only one that feels this way. And in an instant, that lie is broken, and they realize I'm surrounded by 3,000 women that feel this way, and we are in this together, and we can lock arms, and I'm not alone. And it's just incredible how transformational that connection of me too, I'm in this connection, I'm in this with you, I'm in the same boat, I know what that feels like. And I love that you've tapped into that, because even on a larger scale, you've been able to scale this across the country, across the globe, and take it from your little town where it started to online, but then also transferring in person. It's just really, really impressive, but it's also so important what you're doing. So thank you for all of your work and all the blood, sweat, and tears that I know you put into it behind the scenes to make this happen. I could talk to you forever. I love what you're doing, and I'm just such a fan, and so grateful for your time to be on here. I would love it as we wrap up, if you would tell our listeners where they can connect with you, where they can find out more about the Rising Tide Society and all the things that you're working on.
Absolutely. So the best place to connect with me, to be really honest, is either at nataliefranke.com or right on Instagram at Natalie Franke. I am on there every day. I'm using that as one of my main tools to communicate, to support you, and to help your business. And if you're ready to get plugged into a community, I highly recommend checking out the Rising Tide Society. You can go to honeybook.com/risingtide or at Rising Tide Society on Instagram and get plugged into our network. And it's completely free to show up to meetings, and we have them, as I mentioned, in over 400 cities now around the world. So I'd love to see you at a Tuesdays Together meetup sometime in the future.
That's awesome, Natalie. Thank you so much. Before we go, I would love it if you would just leave our listeners and our viewers with one piece of advice of how they can build their own community with their tribe, their customers, their listeners, fans, followers. Give them some words of encouragement or advice on how they can kind of create a small scale of what you've done with their own tribe and group of people.
Absolutely. So barriers are broken when we step beyond the screen and we have the courage to sit down face to face with one other person. So my recommendation would be choose one person this week, just one person, start small, that you want to build a relationship with. A community isn't built by having 1,000 people all show up in one room and suddenly get to know each other. I truly believe the best communities are built one relationship at a time. So my advice would be find one person this week, whether it's on social media or through email. Sit down with them if you can in the next month. Have a cup of coffee and begin cultivating that community one relationship at a time, and you'll be impressed before you know it, whether you're introverted or extroverted, at just how deep you can strengthen those connections. So start simple, start with one, and get plugged in and be brave. All of us are nervous to do it, but be brave.
I love it. Natalie, you're awesome. Thanks so much for all you do, and thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you want to be part of the Business Boutique movement and the free Business Boutique Facebook group, well, all you got to do is click the link below.